What else?
And
Where did
another
you...
thing that I remember I was 4 years old, and I could see them men bringing up a casket. It was a purple velvet on the outside and white on the inside. Then they brought it up, and he had the standards for it. They put it down there. And after it had been opened, somebody picked me up and had me kiss him while he was in the casket.
Yeah.
And I remember that I took the casket out, and there was 3 or 4 of us running around the room because it was all empty then. But that's all I remember of him.
What did he do for a living, and what did he die from?
He had some work. He had been on the railroad, because one Italian got the other next one in. And he was there and earning a living for the family. And then he, one night, or one day, he took a railroad tie, he had it on his back, and he walked up from the roundhouse, because Utica had a roundhouse for the trains.
Right.
And he carried the tie up, I don't know how many miles it was, either 1 or 2 miles or something like that. He strained his heart. And after that, no matter what it was, he couldn't get any better. The doctors all told him the same thing. You have to just sit quiet, because he said you cannot work. And in those days, the man was supposed to work. He was supposed to be the man of the house.
Yeah.
And I don't know how much money my mother spent. As fast as she was making it, she was spending it on doctors.
Yeah.
Because he insisted that there's going to be one who's going to help him out.
Yeah.
And finally, that his heart just gave out. He had just strained it so much, he had enlarged, and there was just no more strength in it.
Do you know what day he died?
It was, I think the funeral was on May 30th, because I seem to remember there was a lot of people in there.
So he would have died the end of May 1923? 22? Okay, so you were just
4.
about 5.
Yeah.
So what was your life like after that?
Well, my mother had work. She worked from one cotton mill to another, and just tried to raise us.
Uh-huh.
But, so Mary was home. She was 13, and she would take care of us kids while my mother was working. But there was no way she could control us, because we'd be running the streets. And welfare wanted my mother to stay home. They said they would support us. But my mother says no, because you tell me what kind of food to put on the table. I'll work and I'll get my own money and I'll put my kind of food on the table. So they just figured that there was nothing but to do there. And finally they prevailed upon her that if she wanted to salvage some of us kids, she better put us in we called them orphanages at that time.
Right.
And so George was 8 and I was 9, and we went up to St. John's. And
where was that?
it was in Hartford. Sat way up on the hill. It was a Spanish motif. It was in yellow type outside, and it had a tiled roof on it, a red tiled roof on it. I remember that much. And my mother said there was 100 steps to get to the top.
Uh-huh.
Because she used to come just about every Sunday to see it.
Okay.
But then Frank and John...
That was in Hartford,
New York.
New York.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. that was just a suburb of
Wow.
Wood.
I didn't know there was one.
Yeah. And but John and Frank were sent to LaSalle School at 391 Western Ave in Albany, New York. And they were there. And George remained at St. John's because he would only be 9 and I was 10.
Right.
And 10, I had to either out or whatever. So I remember my mother, we were sitting on the grass and she asked me if I wanted to come home or whether I wanted to go with John and Frank. I told him I wanted to go with John and Frank.
Yeah.
He said, that's why we went to Albany. And I was there for 2.5 years.
So why did you do that? Why didn't you go home?
Why does a 10-year-old, what's a 10-year-old know?
I don't know.
Right.
You had to have your reason. Just didn't want to go home?
Well, I just thought that John and Frank were there, I'll go with them. Because it was just that I cannot really give you a reason. All I know is that she offered this thing, so I just figured I'd go with them.
Yeah.
I had the 1 year at St. John's, and I didn't know I didn't know my own mind.
Yeah, right.
So I just figured I'd go with them.
So what
So
were your...
So I went to Albany, and I no sooner get there than Frank is talking to me, and then somebody comes up. They want me to fight Andy Oysterhouse. And I nudged Frank. I said, who's this guy? And he said, that's your brother John. Why does he want me to fight? Well, if he wants me to fight, I'll fight. So
So you fought this guy?
no.
Oh, no.
I got to get Andy wasn't that happy about fighting either. I don't know what the deal was, but they were all grouped around us. And then Brother Blinky, we called him Blinky because he had a cast eye.
Yeah.
And he came out there with his Irish brogue and wanted to know what was going on. And one of his favorite expressions was young Spalpeen.
Yeah.
Spalpeen. And he was a good soul. Everybody, all us kids liked him because he loved kids. And
Yeah.
But that's what all came about as far as that. That's my introduction to Frank and John.
Yeah.
But they were in the group because they were older. And I was put in the younger group because I was only 10. So,
What other recollections do you have of that place?
oh, there's all kinds of recollections there. When I met this kid, Albert Bosner, Bostner, and we became pretty good buddies. And read all the Tom Swift books.
Uh-huh.
Get one of the books out of the library and then sit on the swing and just go ahead and read. And it would be dark, and I forget, somebody came along. He says, how can you read in the dark? I said, oh, I can read. He said, you'll go blind. Here I am, about 11 years old. I'm going to worry about going blind.
Yeah, right.
Well, you have to, either I was finishing a chapter or something. I wanted to finish the chapter on it before I closed the book.
Yeah.
And then, instead I had this good yard out there, and then one other time we had the hillside, and they wanted to resod it.
Yeah.
And so what they did, they had the older boys cut them up in about a foot square of sod, and then our younger kids, we had to come over, we allowed them over to where we had some other ones, and they side of that whole hillside. So you had instant grass.
Yeah.
You had that. And another time that I remember, we were in the refectory. That was the mess hall. That's what they call it. They had me monitoring the table, and this Maloney kid was sitting at the end of 2, 4, 8. There would be 10 people at the table, and the kid wasn't paying attention. He was racing hard. And I told him that if he didn't stop talking, that I'd throw this knife at him. And he more or less dared me and I threw up.
Did you get him?
Oh, but you know, the knife wasn't sharp or anything else, but it kept him quiet. The rest of us, they paid attention at the table. But then, the supervising brother heard about it. I don't know how he heard about it, but was going to have a movie on it in the rec hall, and so Marano couldn't go because he didn't know how to take charge of his kids.
Tell me about Babe Ruth.
And then this one time there, Babe Ruth came up, and everybody was excited about it and all that. And here comes this monstrous figure. And you're about 11 years old, and you see somebody like that come in. He had his camel hair coat and his cap on, and his entourage with him. And then one of the brothers had 6 of us lined up, and so he signed the autograph to baseball. And I think we had a sum total of 1 minute. Next minute we knew that the brother was taking them from us, and they were painting us a round fireball in return.
Yeah.
That's what we got. Whatever happened to the baseball, I don't know. But Fort Schuyler, that was the park in Utica, I think was one of the farm teams that the Yankees had at that time. And so the Yankees were playing a game up there, and that's why they were up there. And they told me afterwards we were not going to ball right out of the park, no sweat.
Yeah.
It wouldn't be as large as Yankee Stadium.
Yeah, I love that. So Mom, tell me about your childhood from, you know, what you can recall from the 30s and 40s.
Like what?
What you can recall from the 30s and 40s.
I really can't recall too much. I remember working summers in the pea and bean field making money in order to have clothes for the winter and help put food on the table. I babysat at a very young age all summer for the Saba kids, and I used to help my Aunt Mary with her 2 kids. And I don't know, if I was 10 then, but I probably that was old. And we didn't have a lot, but we had a lot of love in the family. We didn't have a car, so we couldn't go anyplace. If we went anyplace, Uncle George Lewis would have to pack us, many of us, if he could, in his car to take us anyplace.
Right.
We'd get together with the aunts and uncles. That was our life. I can remember going to the movies with my mother and father. My father loved the westerns, and he always had to sit in the balcony. Always had to go upstairs, and that was all we ever did for pleasure.
You went to the movies.
And I don't remember Christmas time. I don't know if I ever had a wrapped gift. I remember once I got a doll. Once I got a wristwatch, but I might have been about 15 then. I can't remember much else than that.
What about your friends at school, or any recollections of anything like that?
Of who?
friends in school?
Oh yes, I can remember my friends in school. We had this one neighbor, her dad was Grandma and Grandpa's boss. Their name was Thomaselli, and their daughter was Gloria, and they had a son, Donnie, and we always envied them because they, even though they lived close by in the company houses where we lived, they had the nicer things, the nicer clothes, and I can remember them being picked in school. Gloria was my age, for being the cleanest because she had a toothbrush and we didn't. And she'd get the prize, maybe a piece of fruit or something. And that I can remember. And it was, if you were chosen to go play at her house, you were privileged. And we were very seldom chosen because we were Lebanese. They didn't think we were clean enough, properly dressed enough. Those are things I remember the most, I think.
Yeah. What were Grandma and Grandpa doing for a living back then?
They were working in the factory
Yeah,
in the Utica Net in Sherburne.
Grandpa
Across
was
the
sick, though,
street.
you said, right? Grandpa was sick a lot, though, right?
My dad was sick a good share of the time. He almost died from the ulcer operation. He almost bled to death, and I can remember that very, very clearly. My mother had just, Uncle George had just brought her home from the hospital from Utica to see Grandpa, and the next thing, we didn't have phones. They called the grocery store and told her my dad was dying. He was going to bleed to death, and Uncle George somehow got her back to Utica, and they saved my dad.
Somehow.
It was a miraculous happening. But I can remember that very vividly because it just sticks in my mind because we thought my dad was going to pass away then, and I was young, but still there. The memory's still there.
How
my
old were
dad
you
was,
at the time? About?
Oh gosh, I don't. I wish I could think of what year that was. I don't remember.
Teenager?
Might have been 12,
Mm.
something like that. And so my dad was sick most of the time, and my mom always worked hard. Never remember my mother that she didn't work. She always had the strength to carry on. Then when my dad recovered from the ulcer operation, even though he always had to be careful of his diet, and he was, very disciplined that way, as you well know.
Right.
And he recovered so that he could go to work, and that's how they worked, and they saved money, and they were able to go into the business. And like I said, I wish I could remember. I don't ever remember them talking about the money, how they got the money to open the restaurant. I don't even know where they even got to know how to even begin.
Yeah.
See, Uncle George Lewis had a restaurant, and that's where they got the idea, on the corner there of 12th and 12B.
Where did George Lewis get his money?
Bootlegging,
Yeah.
but my
Uncle
dad
George
didn't
did.
bootleg it. But that wasn't my dad's thing.
Oh, that's good. You don't want that passed down to our
Uncle George was
generation.
Aunt Mary Lewis used to sell dry goods out of her home. And Mary Lewis was a very good businesswoman. She used to go to Utica and buy yard goods, buy the fabric by the yard.
Yeah.
And then she'd buy dresses and little things like that. And she had a little business going. So
Uncle George basically supported the family a lot. Is
he
that right?
supported, well, he always had more money than anybody. His kids always had the big firecrackers. Of course, he had the car. His kids always got the nice gifts at Christmas time. He had a different lifestyle.
Yeah.
But he was good to all of us. I can remember when I was 11 years old, I had to have my appendix out, and they had to take us then to Utica, to the hospital, and all I wanted to be with me was my Uncle George. I didn't want him to to leave. I wanted Uncle George was back. I remember I want Uncle George.
That's funny. So in any event, so we come up to about the 1940s, and when do you guys meet each other?
Well, when Dad went in the service, I was 16, and I can remember walking. I really didn't know your dad because he had been in the seas, and I didn't know him. But Aunt Florence was my best friend, lived next door, and I can remember walking. Florence and I must have been walking to school, and he might have been walking with us. I can't remember. And you were going to go in the service.
You were coming back from school.
We were coming back, and you were going to go in the service, right? And he teased me. I can remember that. And then he went in the service. And then I used to write to him, and I used to write to all the servicemen. And I used to write to Uncle Jordan, to Uncle Louie, and I used to write to your dad, not knowing who he was, actually. Then he came home, and Aunt Florence always said, I'm saving you for my brother Carlo. I always used to say that. Once in a while I'd date different ones, guys that I knew. And she always used to say that to me, I'm saving you for my brother Carlo. And then, Carlo, you came home when? June?
October
was it the
6th, 1945.
Yeah, and he came home, and he got off the bus, and I can still see his boots getting off the bus, and his sister-in-law, Dolores, screaming, it's him, and of course, Aunt Lucy was there, and Aunt Dee, and and Uncle Frank, and he came to his house. Of course, they all went upstairs. The next thing we knew, Dad said he wanted some liquor, and they didn't have any. And I think, was it Florence came down to my dad?
I said I wanted a drink.
Yeah. So they came down to our house to get some whiskey for your father.
Oh, yeah.
And so after a while, after the family settled down with your dad, Grandma died, and Jane might have been in hairdressing school. I can't remember if Jay went. We went upstairs to see your dad. And he looked at me and he said, oh my God, have you grown up? Because I was only 16 years old when he left. And this is 4 years later. I probably had primped myself up so I looked beautiful. And I remember him saying, oh my God, have you grown up? And then, I don't know, did we go to the movies once in a while before you went to Bath? You came to Bath to work? I think maybe we did.
Yeah, because I didn't get the position over in Bath until May.
Yeah, and I think we went to the movies once or twice. And then he came to Bath.
That was your first date, was the movies?
Yeah. And then he came.
Do you remember what you saw? The movie? No?
What did we go to see?
Yeah, the movie.
I have no idea.
Well, it was in 1946, or was something then, right?
I can't remember. And then he came to Bath, and I wrote to him. And then when he'd come home, we would date.
Yeah.
I could live at Grandma Sophie's house. But the minute your father came home from Bath, I was not allowed to go up there until he came down and got me.
Right.
They just did not approve.
Now, at that point, Grandma Sophie and Grandma Mody lived next door to each other.
Yeah, the same house.
Yeah.
In Germany.
Right. Only Grandma Sophie lived upstairs then. I don't know if you probably don't ever remember being upstairs. No, you would.
No,
they lived upstairs, but I could never go there unless he came down and got me.
Yeah.
My parents said, you just don't do that. And they were very strict about it.
Yeah.
And they were not happy when your dad would come home, because he'd be looped most of the time. And they, at the time, were trying to fix me up with this very distant cousin, and didn't feel that I should get serious with your dad. So we had quite a to-do about that. But I prevailed.
I guess
They really wanted me to marry my cousin Dewey. He was so far distant, but we always called him cousin. And they had fixed it up with his parents, and they thought we were a match, but we weren't. We were just good cousins.
Yeah. What did you like about Dad?
I don't know. I remember I used to, when he first came home, I was hairdressing in Grandma's house. I had a room in Grandma's house.
Yeah.
And I hairdressed there, and I sometimes wasn't busy, so I'd look out the kitchen window, and your dad would be walking to go. You were typing at the school.
Yeah.
And I remember thinking, I think I kind of like him. You know, I just used to love to watch him walk down the street.
Yeah.
And I just enjoyed being with him.
What about you, Dad? What did you like about Mom?
I liked everything about it. I was very comfortable with her.
Yeah.
I could say anything, everything. It made no difference. It's just something that she was just nice to be around.
Yeah.
I was very happy to be with her.
And then, you know, we just, it was hard to carry on a romance that distance, especially because my parents were so strict.
And I didn't have a car.
You were in Bath at that point, right?
He used to have to wait for Uncle George to come. And
George had the car.
Uncle George had the car and used to bring him to Sherburne, so we didn't see a tremendous amount of each other. Then when we did, we never could go out alone. It was
always a group.
Florence and Aunt Jay and my cousin June, and then we would meet your drinking buddies, and Chet and Roy Baker, and we'd all go to the American Legion, and that was because they didn't have a car, and we couldn't get out of town at all.
So do you remember the day that he asked you to marry him?
December 27th. That's when he gave me the diamond. I didn't know I was getting a diamond.
Oh yeah, what year was that?
That was...
What year? 47?
No, it would have been 46.
46?
Yeah, because we were married in 47.
So that was 33 years ago yesterday.
2 days ago.
2 days ago,
I forget
Monday.
And he came down the house with it. And I remember my cousin June and Aunt Jay just went crazy. They said, look at the size of the diamond, Lila. God, look at the size of the diamond. I can remember he had to come down and ask my dad and my grandmother, wasn't it?
Oh yeah, when did you do that?
That was the tradition.
You did it on the same day?
No. It must have been before you bought the ring, Carlo. It had to be.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, but I didn't know he and Aunt Florence went to Utica to get the ring, and I didn't know that. But he had to come down. I remember my grandmother being there. And, you know, my parents weren't happy.
Yeah, right.
But Sita was the type that could talk to them, and she always loved your dad. And it took a long time for Grandma and Grandpa to relate to your dad because they knew that he drank a lot, and they used to say...
Well, you didn't tell them where I went.
What do you mean?
Who had the gas station?
Lewis's, yeah. They used to go to Uncle George Lewis's, he and Chet and Roy.
Yeah.
And then he'd come to take me out, and they could smell the liquor the minute he walked in the house.
Yeah.
Well, whatever it was, anyway.
There was alcohol of some
He didn't have the
right, because he didn't have
You
the
went with
liquor.
him anyway, Mom, even though...
What'd you say?
I said you went with him anyway.
Yeah, I did, but they used to give me a rough time. I mean, I can remember that one time I ended up crying, and he came to the door and I wouldn't answer it. They had gone away, and I thought, I'm not going to answer the door. I've got to end this. I've got to end this.
Yeah.
And I knew it was him at the door, and I was upstairs crying because they did not want me to see your dad anymore. But I can't remember what changed then. It could be that they came home and realized that this is what I wanted. And then, of course, he just planted that love in them for him
Yeah.
that they never, ever, ever got over. I mean, your dad is like a son
Yeah,
son
right.
to both.
Yeah, right, that's right.
Grandma and Grandpa, and it took a while for that relationship to nurture, but once it did, he proved that he was the right man.